A cop grabbed her wrist in front of her sons and asked if they even knew her name. He thought she was just another black woman in the park, until she broke his hold, shielded her boys, and revealed her FBI badge. What happened next would ignite a city, shatter a department, and shake the nation. Before we continue this powerful story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another powerful story you won't want to miss. The sun beamed down gently over Henderson Park, casting long golden rays across the sprawling green lawns and tall sycamore trees. It was the kind of Saturday that felt like a gift, warm but not too hot, busy but not crowded, just enough breeze to keep the heat at bay. Maya Carter sat on a weathered wooden bench near the playground, watching her sons sprint across the grass with a football. Her jeans were flecked with dried dirt from earlier attempts at playing quarterback, and her white t-shirt had a smudge of chocolate ice cream from Caleb's enthusiastic hug. Jordan, her 10-year-old, ran with practiced confidence, clutching the football like he'd just scored the winning touchdown in the Super Bowl. His face was set with mock seriousness, though his eyes were lit with joy. Caleb, just 7 and a little behind in both age and coordination, trailed after him, giggling wildly. "You better run, Jordan!" he shrieked, waving his arms like windmills. Maya laughed softly, her fingers resting on a half-melted cone in her left hand. She licked at the side as it began to drip, watching her son's laughter ripple through the park. These were the moments she lived for, not the ones behind her desk, not the classified cases, not even the courtroom testimonies, but this: sticky ice cream, football spirals, and the innocent belief that the world was still good. Jordan slowed, then suddenly turned and launched the football toward her in a high, wobbly arc. "Heads up, Mom!" Maya stood up instinctively and raised her hands. The ball hit her palm but bounced off her fingers, thudding to the ground. She pretended to stumble backward in dramatic defeat. "Told you she couldn't catch," Jordan shouted between laughs. "Mom's too serious to be good at football," he added, tossing a knowing glance at Caleb, who ran to scoop up the ball. Caleb turned around, indignant. "No way! Mom's good at everything. She just pretends she's not. Right, Mom?" Maya gave a mock-offended gasp and put a hand to her chest. "Excuse me, you think I'm pretending?" She bent down, brushed her hands on her jeans, and stepped forward. "Okay, y'all want to see what I'm really made of?" Jordan's eyes widened. "You're serious?" "I've been serious," she said with a grin, taking the ball from Caleb. With one fluid motion, she launched a perfect spiral across the grass that sliced through the air and landed right in Jordan's arms. "No fair," he yelped. "You've been holding out on us." Maya put her hands on her hips. "Maybe you just underestimated your old mom." Caleb clapped excitedly. "Do it again! Do it again!" She let out a content sigh. This felt right. After weeks of long nights, classified briefings, and navigating a world that questioned her at every turn, she had finally carved out a few hours to just be Mom. Not Agent Carter, not the one who wrote affidavits or stood in front of juries, just the woman who bought ice cream cones, dropped spirals, and made her boys laugh until their cheeks hurt. And for a moment, it was enough. 20 feet away, a white couple sat at a shaded picnic table. The woman wore dark sunglasses and a beige cardigan draped loosely over her shoulders despite the heat. Her husband was broad-shouldered and stiff, his arms crossed as he watched the boys play. Maya had noticed them when they arrived, how the woman's gaze never left her for long, how their expressions had sharpened when Caleb had screamed with laughter during their first game of tag. Maya sat back down, letting her heartbeat return to a slow rhythm. She kept her smile steady for the boys, but didn't miss the way the woman leaned in toward her husband and whispered something. The man looked up and narrowed his eyes, then followed Maya's movements across the field like she was a piece of broken glass left in a sandbox. She had seen that look before, plenty of times, from TSA agents, from store clerks, from people in meetings who smiled with their mouths but clenched their eyes. It was the look of someone who had already decided who she was. Her fingers tightened slightly around the melting cone. Not here, not today. She glanced back at the boys. Jordan was drawing now, tucked into a corner of the bench with his ever-present sketchbook. Caleb kicked the football to himself, chasing it in crooked lines across the grass. A sharp breeze brushed Maya's curls into her face. She tucked them behind her ear and sighed. "Hey!" she called out with as much cheer as she could muster. "Tag, anyone?" Caleb's head snapped up. "Yes," he cried. Jordan closed his sketchbook reluctantly but smiled. Maya stood and dusted off her jeans again. "Y'all ready to see who's really the fastest Carter?" Caleb grinned. "You're not faster than me." "We'll see," she said with a wink. They launched into a lopsided game of tag, zigzagging through patches of shade and around the picnic tables. Caleb screamed with delight when she let him tag her. Jordan made it a mission to cut sharp angles and dive behind benches, laughing breathlessly as his mother tried to chase him. For a moment, all three of them forgot the world. They were just a mother and her sons on a sunny afternoon. But the woman never stopped watching. From the corner of her eye, Maya saw the phone rise, saw the way the woman cupped her hand around it, pretending to check a text message, then turned slightly and began to speak low and fast. Maya didn't want to overreact. She didn't want to give her sons any reason to be afraid. So she kept playing, running slow circles around the trees, smiling even as her stomach tightened. Then she heard it, just fragments carried on the wind. Suspicious behavior, woman, 2 boys, might not be hers. Maya's throat went dry. She glanced toward the bench. Jordan had paused again. His pencil hovered mid-air. His face was no longer joyful, it was watchful, alert. His eyes flicked between Maya and the woman with the phone. He'd heard it too. Maya slowed her jog and walked over to Jordan, who sat frozen on the bench, his sketchbook open but untouched. His fingers gripped the pencil tightly, the tip pressed against the page. She knelt beside him, heart aching. "You okay, baby?" He didn't look at her. "Why's that lady talking about us?" Maya glanced at the woman, who now looked away and laughed awkwardly into her phone like she hadn't just accused a mother of kidnapping her children. The man beside her had folded his arms again, watching Maya with thinly disguised contempt. "Because," Maya said gently, "some people don't see what's really in front of them." Jordan turned to look at her. "She said we might not be yours, that you look different." "Huh?" Maya nodded slowly. "I know what she said, and I know what it made you feel. But you need to remember something, okay?" Jordan blinked. "You belong here," Maya said, placing her hand on his knee. "You and Caleb, you didn't do anything wrong. We were laughing, we were playing. This is your park, too." Jordan's bottom lip trembled just slightly, but he nodded. "Look at me," she said softly. He did. "Don't let them steal your joy." He nodded again, this time stronger. "I won't." Maya hugged him, quick and tight. Then she stood and turned back toward the field. Caleb had stopped playing, sensing the shift in energy. "Mom," he called, running over with the football in hand. "Are we going home?" "No, baby," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Not yet. We've still got tag to finish, and I think I'm winning." Caleb brightened. "No way." She tousled his curls and gestured toward the open field. "Then you better run, little man." He did, legs pumping hard, laughter chasing behind him. Maya stayed close now, close enough to hear the woman's voice continue on the phone. He's circling, acting erratic, watching kids that aren't hers. Maya's smile tightened, her hands curled into fists, then unclenched. She would not raise her voice. She would not confront the woman, not yet. She knew better than to give them anything they could twist, not in front of her boys, not when their safety was the only thing that mattered. But her heart pounded harder now. Her training whispered in her ear, scenarios, risks, reactions. She ran through them like a mental simulation, assessing every angle, every potential outcome. And still, she smiled for Caleb. Still, she kept herself tall and unbothered. Still, she stayed in plain view. Because Maya Carter wasn't just any mother. And if they pushed her far enough, they were going to find out exactly who she was. The first sound was the crunch of gravel under slow-moving tires. It was distant at first, almost drowned out by the breeze in the trees and the laughter of kids nearby. But Maya's ears caught it before her conscious mind did, that faint, familiar rumble that never meant anything good. Then she saw it. A black and white squad car creeping along the edge of the park's lot, moving slow, deliberate, like a shark circling shallow waters. The light bar on top wasn't flashing, but the mood shifted the second the vehicle came into view. Parents pulled their children a little closer. Conversations dipped. A couple pushing a stroller paused mid-stride. The same woman who had made the call stood up straighter at her picnic table, one hand still on the phone, her other brushing invisible crumbs from her slacks, as if preparing for a performance. Maya didn't speak. She didn't sigh. She didn't blink. But everything inside her snapped into alignment. Her FBI training kicked in like muscle memory. She scanned the area. Entry points, exit points, civilian proximity, line of sight to her vehicle, camera angles. She positioned her body slightly forward, making herself the first barrier between her boys and whatever came next. Jordan stood next to her, notebook in hand, eyes narrowed. He hadn't even realized he'd drawn his mother with a cape until now. Caleb clutched the football tighter and glanced up at her. "Rod, I see it, baby," Maya said calmly. "It's all right, just stay close." The squad car rolled to a stop near the curb. Two officers stepped out. The taller one adjusted his belt as he exited the vehicle, his sunglasses reflecting the sunlight and everything in front of him. The other walked with a practiced stiffness, the kind that comes from years of power without challenge. Maya had seen their type before. One wore a nameplate that read Officer M. Bailey. The other, leaner and younger, was labeled Carson. They scanned the crowd as they walked, and then their eyes locked on her, and didn't let go. Maya placed one hand gently on Caleb's back, the other brushing Jordan's shoulder. Her fingers were steady, her breath even, but inside, her blood felt like fire. She recognized the tension in the air, the moment before the match strikes. The crowd felt it too. A few people reached for their phones. The invisible stage had been set. And Maya Carter stood at the center. Bailey was the first to speak as he approached. "Afternoon, ma'am, we received a call about some suspicious behavior." His tone was clipped, controlled, measured with the same fake politeness she'd heard 1,000 times in surveillance recordings and incident reports, the kind that cloaked power in sugar. Maya gave a slight nod. "We're just enjoying the park." Bailey's eyes slid to the boys, then back to her. "Mind if we ask you a few questions?" Jordan's fingers dug into her jeans. Caleb stepped closer, bumping her leg. Maya didn't move. "You can ask." Officer Carson took a step forward, hands resting near his belt. "We got a report of a woman who might be here, with children that don't belong to her," he said, "possibly abducted." The words hung in the air like poison. Jordan stiffened. Caleb's brow furrowed in confusion. Maya kept her voice even. "These are my sons. We're here playing football, like everyone else." Bailey gave a shallow nod like he wasn't listening. His eyes stayed on the boys. "Can I talk to them directly?" Maya didn't move. "Talk to them about what?" Carson leaned in slightly. "Just want to confirm their identities, for their safety." Maya turned her head toward her children. "Boys, listen to me. You don't have to answer anything that makes you uncomfortable. But if you feel safe, it's okay to speak." Jordan looked up. His face wasn't afraid. It was furious, in a quiet, tight-lipped way. "My name is Jordan Carter," he said, clear as a bell. "This is my little brother, Caleb. That's our mom." Caleb nodded quickly. "She's Dr. Maya Carter. She works with the FBI." Bailey blinked. "She what?" She helps catch bad guys, Caleb added proudly. Maya let a brief silence fall, enough to let it sting. Bailey's jaw shifted. We're going to need to verify that. Maya's tone cooled. I'm happy to verify my identity. But let's be clear. You approached a mother playing with her children based on a single phone call and no evidence. Carson looked over his shoulder toward the woman at the picnic table. She was still watching, still gripping her phone like it had saved the world. She seemed pretty concerned, Carson said flatly. Maya nodded once. Some people are more concerned with color than with truth. Bailey stepped to the side, changing his angle slightly. Not aggressive, but not casual either. Look, ma'am, we're just doing our jobs. All we're asking for is cooperation. You have it, Maya said. You've asked questions. I've answered. My sons have confirmed who I am. We'll still need identification. You will, she said, but I'm going to ask that you step back while I retrieve it. I'm not reaching into any bags with 2 armed officers in front of my children unless you stand down first. Carson crossed his arms. That's not how this works. It is today. A flicker passed across Bailey's face. It wasn't rage, it was calculation. He looked at Maya for a long moment, then took one slow step forward. Maya's shoulders straightened. Then came the sound. The unmistakable beep of a cell phone camera. 1 person, then 2, then 5. People around the park had begun recording. No one said a word, but the crowd had shifted. The air was different now. Maya saw it in Bailey's eyes, the recognition, the twitch of discomfort. This wasn't a quiet moment anymore. Whatever happened next, the world would see it. Bailey exhaled sharply and lowered his tone. Let's make this easy. You show us some ID and we'll be on our way. Maya's voice didn't waver. You still haven't told me what law I've broken. Carson stepped forward again, more impatient this time. We're not saying you've broken any laws. We're saying we got a call. That gives us the right to investigate. Gives you the right to ask questions, Maya said, which I've answered. Now, unless you have reasonable suspicion of a crime, you're overstepping. Bailey's tone hardened. Look, we're not looking for trouble. Neither am I, Maya replied. I brought my sons to the park, that's all. The moment stretched long and tense. Carson glanced again toward the woman at the picnic table, now standing, clearly enjoying the scene she had helped manufacture. Bailey adjusted his belt, then took a more aggressive stance. Let me be blunt, ma'am. You can either cooperate now, or we can take this conversation downtown. Caleb's small hand grabbed the hem of Maya's shirt. Jordan stepped closer, his sketchbook pressed tightly to his chest. Maya took a breath, a deep one, not out of fear, but out of calculation. Every second she stood here, she was measuring responses, predicting outcomes, not just for herself, but for the 2 small hearts now pressed against her sides. She spoke slowly, deliberately. Officers, I'm asking you again in front of all these witnesses and your own body cams, what is your probable cause for detaining me? Bailey didn't answer, not immediately. Instead, he looked over Maya's shoulder toward her SUV parked near the curb. The vehicle yours? Yeah. Looks like a match to a description from a recent vehicle theft report. Maya's lips parted in disbelief. Now you're making things up. Bailey shrugged. We'll find out soon enough, but if you make this harder than it needs to be… Maya cut in, her voice firm. You are inventing a reason to escalate. We're doing our jobs, Bailey said. Are you going to let us do them? No, she said, not like this. The tension around them thickened. More phones were recording now. A small group had formed near the sidewalk. Someone whispered, "She's right. This is harassment." Another voice followed, "They're just kids." Bailey didn't like the attention. His eyes darted toward the growing crowd. His voice dropped, quiet but cutting. You think all these people are going to stop us? Maya's stare didn't break. I think you should think very carefully about what you're about to do. Carson shifted again. His hand hovered too close to his belt. Jordan whispered, Mom, Maya lowered her head slightly toward her sons. "I'm here. I've got you." Caleb was trembling. Bailey took one more step forward. "Last chance, ma'am." Maya didn't move. She kept her boys behind her, and she looked Officer Bailey squarely in the eye. "I am not a threat. I am not a suspect. I am a mother standing in a public park with her children. If you lay a hand on me, everything changes." Bailey's jaw twitched. And just like that, the storm had arrived. Bailey's face didn't twitch. He stared at Maya like he was trying to figure out what she was hiding, even though she had already told him everything. His silence stretched on, feeding the tension like gasoline soaking dry brush. Then he said it. "An SUV matches a description we got this morning. Possible connection to a string of break-ins. Dark SUV, female suspect, 2 juveniles, just saying. It fits." It was the kind of lie that sounded just vague enough to pass if no one challenged it. But Maya wasn't about to let it go unchecked. Not with her boys listening. Not in front of cameras. She squared her shoulders and said evenly, "That is absolutely false, and you know it." Bailey shrugged. "Ma'am, we don't know what's true until we verify. That's how this works." Maya took a deep breath. "So let me be clear. You're accusing me of car theft in front of my sons, with no evidence, no warrant, no report that names me, just a vague description that conveniently fits the woman you've already decided is suspicious because she's black in a public park." Jordan's eyes filled with tears, but he didn't let them fall. He bit his lip and stood tall beside his mother. Caleb clutched her hand, tighter than ever, his small knuckles turning white. Bailey didn't back down. "Ma'am, I'm asking you one more time to show ID. Step away from the kids, and we'll sort this out at the station." "No," Maya said. "We are not going anywhere. I told you who I am. I told you these are my children. You have no cause." Carson shifted beside Bailey, a nervous glance flicking toward the growing group of onlookers. One woman muttered, "This is disgusting." A man nearby added, "She already told you who she is. Let her go." But Bailey didn't blink. He narrowed his eyes and gestured toward Maya's bag. "If you won't cooperate, we'll retrieve the ID ourselves." "You will do no such thing," Maya said, her voice rising slightly now, not out of fear, but control. Her hand moved slowly, calmly toward her purse. "I'll show you the ID. I want this to end. But you will not touch me, and you will not frighten my sons." Jordan held his breath. Caleb's hand squeezed tighter. Bailey nodded slowly. "Fine, get it." She reached in, deliberately slow, her hand brushing aside the notebook and sanitizer bottle. She touched the leather ID wallet tucked in the side panel, and then she felt it. The pressure. Bailey's hand. He grabbed her wrist. Hard. Maya's body reacted before her brain could even catch up. The grip was sudden, jarring. It sent a shock up her arm and a flood of heat to her chest. Her sons flinched at the same time she did. But this wasn't panic. This was training. With one fluid motion, Maya twisted her wrist against the pressure, turning outward. Classic joint manipulation. She stepped back, guiding Caleb behind her as she pulled her arm free with calculated force. Her stance dropped low, knees slightly bent, her back foot anchoring her body weight. Bailey stumbled one step, surprised. Carson took a defensive step sideways, hand flinching toward his belt. Maya raised her voice, not a scream, but loud enough for the crowd and cameras. "Do not put your hands on me. I have complied. I gave you no threat, and now you've crossed a line." Bailey's face turned red. "You resisted." "I defended myself," she snapped, "and I did so while protecting 2 children standing beside me." The crowd responded audibly, a wave of gasps. Someone shouted, "She's right." Another voice yelled, "You're being filmed." Jordan stepped in front of Caleb instinctively, his arms out like a shield, shaking visibly but trying not to show it. Maya placed a hand on his shoulder, steadying him. Bailey looked around, suddenly unsure. He hadn't expected resistance. Not this kind, not this woman. The confidence, the clarity, the sheer control. He was used to authority working like gravity, pulling everyone downward. But she wasn't falling. Carson finally spoke, quiet and sharp. Like she might actually be who she says she is. Bailey glared. Doesn't matter. She laid hands on me. Maya's voice cut through the noise. I didn't lay hands on you. I removed yours from me, on camera, in front of witnesses, in front of my children. Bailey's jaw locked. Maya didn't move. Instead, she bent slightly at the knee. One hand reached slowly into the open purse, keeping the other hand visible. No sudden motion, just deliberate, confident purpose. She pulled out the black leather wallet, slipped it open. A silver badge gleamed in the sunlight, its eagle crest catching the reflection from the nearest phone camera. Underneath the shield, her credentials. Dr. Maya Carter, Special Agent, Federal Bureau of Investigation. The moment stopped. Completely. Carson blinked twice. Bailey's mouth opened, but made no sound. Maya's voice rang out sharp and absolute. I am Special Agent Dr. Maya Carter, Federal Bureau of Investigation. You just assaulted a federal officer. Gasps rippled through the crowd, like a ripple across still water. Phones raised higher, people pushed closer, murmuring, whispering, trying to make sure they'd seen what they thought they'd seen. Did she say FBI? She's an agent? The man grabbed her. I got it all. Maya's eyes stayed locked on Bailey. She didn't blink, didn't flinch, didn't move. She let the silence do the work. Bailey stepped back, like gravity had finally caught him. Carson's mouth moved, but nothing came out. His hand dropped away from his belt, and he stepped behind Bailey, suddenly looking like a child hiding behind a taller kid at recess. Maya lowered her badge, turning it slightly for the cameras. She wasn't just proving her identity, she was documenting the truth. Then, calmly, she turned to her sons. Jordan, Caleb, get behind me. They obeyed without hesitation, stepping behind her like well-rehearsed choreography. Jordan grabbed Caleb's hand this time. Maya turned back toward the two officers. Back away from my children, immediately. Bailey stared at her, his lips tight, nostrils flaring. The kind of face a man makes when everything he thought he controlled slips through his fingers. He didn't move fast, but he moved. One slow step back, then another. Carson followed. The tension didn't leave. It pulsed in the air like static. But the direction had changed. The power had shifted. Everyone watching could feel it. Maya lifted her badge again, speaking clearly for every phone recording. This officer assaulted me without cause. He fabricated a reason to detain me. He accused me of car theft and child abduction in front of my sons. This was racial profiling. This was abuse of power. And I will be filing a formal report with the U.S. Department of Justice. Bailey tried to speak. You were? She didn't let him finish. Don't. Not another word. You were warned. You escalated. Carson stepped forward, his voice softer. Look, maybe we just got off on the wrong... Maya raised a hand. I don't want explanations, I want names, badge numbers, and I want you out of this park, now. Were phones lifted? A teenager in a hoodie shouted, "Tell it, Agent Carter." The crowd responded with claps, whistles, a sudden surge of verbal support. She protected her babies. About time somebody said something. Whew! That part? That badge ain't fake. Bailey looked at the cameras, the dozens of them now pointed directly at his face. He reached up, finally and adjusted his vest, a nervous tick. Carson quietly muttered his badge number. Bailey didn't. Maya asked again. I said badge number. Bailey hesitated, then gave it. The air was sharp with shame. The officers turned slowly and began walking back to the car. No sirens, no arrests, just the echo of their boots on concrete and the weight of 100 eyes following them. Maya exhaled slowly, then turned to her sons. You okay? Caleb nodded, wide-eyed. Jordan asked quietly, are they going to come back? No, Maya said. They won't. And this time, the world would know why. Time didn't just slow down, it fractured. The park, once buzzing with afternoon chatter, had gone eerily silent. The only sound was the rustling of wind through the trees, broken occasionally by the electronic hum of phones recording, still capturing every movement, every breath. The woman who had called the cops, a thin white woman in yoga pants and sunglasses, stood frozen a few yards away. Her face had drained of color. She looked like she'd seen a ghost, though she was the one who had summoned this haunting. Her phone was still in her hand, but her fingers trembled around it. Bailey didn't move, neither did Carson. They stood suspended as if bound not by cuffs, but by the weight of their own mistake. Bailey's jaw was locked, but his eyes darted toward the crowd, toward Maya, toward the cameras. There was nowhere left to hide. Maya took a slow step forward. Jordan and Caleb remained behind her just as she told them. She held her badge high, not for show, not for pride, but for truth. Her voice was calm but thunderous. Every mistake you made in the last 5 minutes is now a federal offense. Bailey blinked, as if trying to replay it all in his mind. The unnecessary stop, the baseless accusations, the grab, the threat of drawing a weapon, all in front of children, all caught on multiple cameras, all against a federal agent. Carson opened his mouth but said nothing. Maya didn't wait. You had multiple chances to de-escalate. Instead, you manufactured a story. You escalated force against a non-threatening civilian. You endangered children. She pointed toward her sons, Jordan still holding Caleb, whose face was red from crying silently. You made my children afraid of their own country. The words cut deep. Someone in the crowd murmured, "Tell it," another added, "that part." Bailey finally spoke. You resisted. Maya raised her chin. I broke your grip. I protected my body. That's not resistance. That's survival. A few people clapped. Carson looked to Bailey like he needed direction, like he hoped someone would take the decision away from him, but Bailey was in too deep to give orders. He just stood there, fists clenched, teeth grinding. And Maya, she didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't step back. She simply existed in full presence, as if daring anyone to deny what she was, what she had become, what she had always been. The badge still shimmered in her hand, and around her the world had stopped spinning. The sirens came next, not wailing but urgent. 2 more squad cars pulled up along the curb, tires screeching slightly as they came to a halt. The doors opened quickly, and officers stepped out, scanning the scene, already tense. They saw the crowd. They saw the phones. And then they saw Bailey and Carson standing frozen beside a black woman holding up a federal badge. The lead officer was a supervising sergeant, older, heavy-set with gray at the temples and a grizzled voice that cut through the murmurs. What the hell's going on here? Bailey turned toward him, trying to reclaim ground. Possible suspect refused ID. Situation got tense. The sergeant's eyes narrowed. What's her name? Maya answered before Bailey could. Dr. Maya Carter, Special Agent, Federal Bureau of Investigation. The sergeant blinked once. That changed everything. I'm reaching for my credentials now. Slowly, Maya said, her voice firm and loud enough for the crowd to hear. She moved deliberately, removing her laminated credentials from the inside pocket of her bag and handing them over. The sergeant took them, read them. His jaw tightened. He glanced at Bailey. You put hands on her? Bailey didn't answer. The sergeant asked again, louder. You put hands on a federal agent? Bailey looked like he might throw up. Carson muttered. He thought she was bluffing. That did not help. The sergeant turned to Maya, handing the credentials back with a respectful nod. Ma'am, I'm sorry. We're going to get this sorted out immediately. Maya nodded, calm and professional. Good. because what just happened in this park is going to have consequences." The crowd stirred again, now buzzing with whispers and commentary. The phrase "federal agent" passed from mouth to mouth like electricity. Someone in the back shouted, "That's why she moved like that." Another added, "She flipped him in a second." One teenager said, "She didn't even flinch, like she knew what to do." A woman holding a toddler whispered to her husband, "She could have been killed, right here, in front of her babies." Phones were still up, still recording, still streaming. The truth had found a stage. The sergeant turned back toward the younger officers. "I want badge numbers, reports, everything in writing." Bailey's mouth twitched. "She hit me." The sergeant raised a brow. "Really? On camera? With that many witnesses? You want to run that line?" Bailey swallowed hard but said nothing else. Jordan was still holding Caleb, but Maya reached for her sons gently. She pulled them both into her arms. "It's okay. You're safe now." She whispered it like a promise. The sergeant gave a nod toward the original caller, the woman in yoga pants. She looked terrified now, backing away slowly, as if trying to vanish into the crowd. The sergeant didn't stop her, but Maya watched her, just long enough for their eyes to meet. The woman broke first and disappeared. Maya turned back to her sons, crouching slightly so she could look them both in the eye. Her tone shifted from iron to warmth, from warrior to mother. "Iroba," she said to them, watching as they walked over to where her son, Maya, and "You were brave, both of you. You did nothing wrong, nothing." Jordan looked down. "I was scared." "That's not weakness," Maya said softly. "That's being human. You stood your ground, and you protected your brother. That's strength." Caleb buried his face in her neck. The crowd was still gathered, murmuring and waiting. They knew what they had witnessed was bigger than any one moment. It was a rupture, a crack in the illusion that injustice could stay hidden. Then Bailey tried again. "She assaulted us." The words dropped like a bad punchline. The crowd erupted, not in laughter, but outrage. "Are you serious? We saw what happened. Lee laid her shit on you until you grabbed her." Maya didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. She stood slowly and said, "I defended myself against unlawful aggression. I identified myself as a federal officer. You ignored that. You escalated. It's all on tape." She pointed toward the crowd. "Dozens of tapes." The sergeant nodded behind her. "We'll collect every one of them." Bailey's story was already crumbling. Carson tried to pivot. "It was a misunderstanding. We thought she was—" Maya cut in. "You thought I was a threat because I'm black, because I had 2 children with me, because I didn't look scared enough. You ignored my words, you ignored the truth, and you tried to force compliance instead of seeking understanding." Someone in the crowd shouted, "That's the whole problem." Maya continued, "I've spent my life working cases that put me in danger, real danger. But today, right here, in a public park with my sons, you became the threat." Bailey stepped back again, his eyes now darting toward the sergeant, toward the cameras, toward the inevitable consequence he couldn't outrun. Maya lowered her badge, her tone now clear and final. "This isn't over. And I promise you, it won't be buried." The crowd applauded. A ripple of hope rose among them, not because justice had been served yet, but because someone had stood up, had drawn a line, had refused to be small. As officers began dispersing the scene and the crowd slowly began to break into clusters of discussion, Maya took her sons by the hand. She led them away from the patrol cars, away from Bailey, away from the woman who had vanished into silence. She wasn't walking in retreat. She was reclaiming space. And behind her, every camera still pointed in her direction, because this wasn't just a story anymore. It was a movement waiting to ignite. The moment the crowd began to thin and the murmur of voices turned into a low tide of outrage, the second wave arrived. A dark SUV with government plates pulled up behind the patrol cars. From it stepped a man Maya hadn't seen in years but had read about often. Captain Richard Harlan. Tall, broad-chested, with steel-gray hair and a face that had mastered the expression of condescending calm. He wore his badge on his belt like a branding iron, and walked like every step confirmed his authority. He moved through the crowd like he owned the pavement, nodding politely to the supervising sergeant, whose posture immediately stiffened. Harlan scanned the area, assessing everything. The still assemblage cameras, the standing officers, and finally, Maya, who remained calm with her sons by her side. When their eyes met, Maya didn't blink. "Special Agent Carter," he said coolly, hands folded behind his back. "I'm Captain Harlan. If you are who you say you are, this will all be investigated thoroughly." There it was, the first blow cloaked in velvet, a conditional recognition, a performance of neutrality. Maya raised her badge again, even though the sergeant had already verified it. "I am who I say I am, and this incident is already being documented from multiple angles." Harlan gave a slow, knowing nod. Then came the smile, thin, cold, practiced. "Of course it is." He turned to the sergeant. "Secure statements, preserve all recordings, and let's move this crowd out. We'll handle the rest." The sergeant hesitated. "Sir, there are federal implications." "I'm aware." He was already spinning it. Maya could see it in the way he addressed his officers. Short phrases, clipped commands, establishing authority, shifting the tone. Bailey and Carson looked relieved at his presence, as if they'd been waiting for a cleanup crew. Harlan turned to her again. "We want the truth, and if everything went how you say, I'm sure that'll come out." Jordan tightened his grip on Maya's hand. Maya's voice was even. "The truth isn't what you want control. But control and truth don't always live in the same house." That made Harlan's smile tighten just a fraction. "Ma'am, if you'd like to lodge a complaint, we'll walk you through the proper channels." "I don't need channels. I need accountability." That answer didn't amuse him. He nodded again, but this time the smile didn't return. "Then I suggest we all proceed professionally." As he walked away, Maya watched him whisper something to Bailey, low and deliberate. Bailey nodded, jaw tight, hands still raw from the encounter. The message was clear. The protection of power had arrived, and Maya knew the next storm wouldn't come from fists. It would come from paper. By the time Maya got home and checked her email that night, the retaliation had already begun. 2 internal complaint notices had been filed. She scanned them quickly, both written by Bailey and Carson. Their reports painted her as erratic, uncooperative, and aggressive. They claimed she refused to provide identification, refused lawful orders, and used unnecessary force. They left out the initial profiling, the false accusations, the threats made in front of her children. They rewrote the moment Bailey grabbed her wrist, framing it as a defensive maneuver in response to hostility. They called her unstable. The most disturbing part wasn't the lie, it was the precision of it. The language had been curated, worded in the vague legal jargon that sounded plausible to anyone unfamiliar with the truth. They were already closing ranks. She could feel it. Harlan had activated a quiet wall of silence, subtle enough to seem like protocol, but strong enough to twist her credibility. The crowd had seen what happened. But official records would say otherwise unless she acted fast. Her phone buzzed. It was a colleague from the bureau. "I heard something went down. You okay?" Maya exhaled. "I'm fine. But they're already writing fiction." The colleague paused. "Want me to check if there's chatter on our end?" "Yes." Quietly. She hung up and walked into the living room where her sons were watching cartoons. They'd been unusually quiet since they got home. Caleb barely spoke. Jordan kept checking the windows. Maya sat beside them. "Everything's all right," she said softly. "We're home. You're safe." Jordan turned. "But you're not." The words landed heavy. Heavy because they were true. Heavy because they came from a child who should never have had to say them. "I saw that man smile," Jordan whispered. "He wasn't smiling like he liked you. He was smiling like he was going to do something bad." Maya nodded slowly. "That smile? That's the kind of smile people wear when they don't want to admit they're wrong, when they think power makes them untouchable. "Is he your boss?" Caleb asked, voice small. "No," Maya replied. "He thinks he is. But my badge outranks his." "But he had more police," Caleb said, "and they all listened to him." Maya didn't deny it. Sometimes the truth takes longer to be heard, but that doesn't make it less true. The boys didn't look convinced. She wasn't either. And then, like clockwork, her bureau email lit up again. A request for a formal statement. The inquiry wasn't internal. It was coming from local law enforcement. Harlan was trying to get ahead of the story, filing his narrative, framing her as an aggressor, forcing her into a reactive position. Maya stared at the screen. The system wasn't defending her badge. It was daring her to use it. The next morning, Maya dropped her sons off at her mother's house on the edge of town. Her mother didn't ask questions, just gave her a long hug, eyes full of the worry words couldn't carry. On the way back, Maya took the long route, partly to clear her head, partly because her gut told her she needed to. That's when she saw it. A black sedan, same one she noticed near the bureau office last week, same one that didn't belong to any federal fleet. It was behind her again, not close, not tailgating, but consistent, steady. Every turn she made it followed, every lane change, every pause at a stoplight. It matched her rhythm like a shadow. She tightened her grip on the steering wheel and turned down a side street, watching the mirror. It followed. She wasn't being paranoid. This was surveillance. And it wasn't subtle. Maya took out her phone and snapped a photo through the mirror, just in case. Then she sped up, turned sharply through a nearby parking lot, exited through the other side, and doubled back. The sedan didn't follow this time. Gone, just like that. She knew the tactic, intimidation, not pursuit, meant to rattle her, meant to show her she was being watched. When she got home, she parked inside the garage and locked the door behind her. She walked straight to her desk and opened the evidence folder she'd already begun building. Copies of video footage, statements from witnesses in the crowd, her own notes. She added the surveillance photo. The story they were trying to tell wouldn't hold, but only if she told hers louder. That evening, as she sat down for dinner with her sons, Jordan looked up from his plate. "Yes, baby? Are they going to hurt you?" Maya paused. She didn't lie. "They'll try." The words made Jordan's shoulders stiffen. Caleb dropped his fork. "But we're going to fight," Maya added. "Not with fists. Not with fear. With the truth." Jordan nodded slowly. "You won't let them win, right?" Maya reached across the table and took both their hands. "They already lost," she said, her voice steady. "The moment they touched me thinking I was powerless, that's the moment they lost. Now we make sure everyone sees it." Caleb's eyes watered. "Promise?" "I promise." That night, as they slept, Maya sat at her laptop drafting her formal response. Line by line, she detailed the stop, the escalation, the physical contact, her verbal identification, and the moment she displayed her credentials. She cited the presence of multiple witnesses, ongoing video evidence, and named every officer involved. Then she made a call, not to local law enforcement, to the Bureau's Office of Professional Responsibility. She wasn't going to let Harlan run the narrative. Not this time. Not again. Because power wasn't in the badge. It was in the truth you dared to speak. And she was just getting started. The sun dipped low over the neighborhood as Maya pulled onto her quiet street, exhaustion lining every part of her face. The day had been long. Debriefings, phone calls, paperwork she didn't trust to submit through official channels. Her ribs ached faintly from stress, tension, but she kept her face calm. The boys were with her mother. For now, at least, they were safe. She turned the corner onto her block and slowed. Her eyes immediately caught an unfamiliar vehicle idling across from her driveway. It wasn't a neighbor's. It wasn't delivery. It was parked just wrong, too deliberate, tinted windows, engines still running. Her heart picked up. She drove slowly past her own house instead of pulling in, keeping her gaze steady but careful not to look directly at the car. Her pulse sharpened as she took the next corner. Once out of sight, she pulled over in the alley behind the neighborhood park and took out her phone. She texted her neighbor Patrice 2 houses down. "Can you keep an eye on my house? There's a car outside. Boys are with my mom. Just don't let them come back yet." Seconds later, Patrice replied, "I see it. Black SUV. Been there since just after noon. No movement. I'll stay watching, locking up now." Maya exhaled slowly. Her gut hadn't been wrong. She waited 15 more minutes before circling the block again, checking twice for a tail. Still clear. The black SUV was still there. No one had gotten out. No shift in shadows. She gripped the steering wheel tighter, forced her mind to slow down. She knew this tactic: psychological pressure. Let the target feel unsafe in their own space. Let them get paranoid enough to slip up. But Maya had seen this playbook before. She'd helped write the protocols to dismantle it. Though she didn't go in the front, she parked 2 blocks over, cut the engine and walked the long way around through neighbor yards and fences until she approached her own backyard. Her fingers brushed over the holster at her waist as she unlocked the back door quietly and stepped inside. The house was still, too still. She kept the lights off. Maya moved room to room, clearing it tactically. She even checked the crawl space, the attic access in the hall, the pantry. Nothing. No forced entry, no sign of movement inside. She checked the garage through the side door and saw her security system light blinking red. There had been motion earlier in the day. She looked up. One of her outdoor cameras had been spray-painted. Deliberate, silent, coordinated. She texted Patrice again. "Keep the boys overnight. Something's off." Then she sat on the couch, hand near her sidearm, and waited. Her mind played every worst-case scenario, every possibility, every angle. But she didn't move. She didn't panic. Because they wanted her scared. They wanted her reactive. She'd spent years facing down war criminals and arms dealers. She wasn't going to fold over a scare tactic on her own front lawn. But she also knew this wasn't just intimidation anymore. This was the beginning of something much worse. The next morning was cloudless, still, and strangely quiet. Birds chirped in the distance, and the street looked exactly as it always had, peaceful, unsuspecting. But Maya's skin buzzed with warning. She'd barely slept, her back propped against the wall, service weapon resting in her lap. She took a slow breath, checked her phone for messages. Nothing urgent. Then stood and moved through the house, rechecking all locks and vantage points. Just after 10 a.m., she decided to leave for a scheduled meeting with an OPR liaison in the city. She needed to get out, collect herself, and ensure this didn't stall momentum. She grabbed her keys, reholstered her weapon, and walked out the side door toward her garage. That's when it happened. As soon as she stepped into the open, she heard footsteps. 3 sets. Fast. Her instincts screamed. She turned just in time to see 3 masked men in black clothing sprinting from the far side of her property. They moved with purpose, not like kids messing around. Trained. Tactical. The first one lunged, grabbing for her wrist. Big mistake. She twisted her body, yanked him forward, and slammed her elbow into his jaw. He stumbled, but the second man was already behind her, kicking at her knee. She absorbed it, rolled forward, and used the momentum to sweep his leg. He hit the pavement hard. The third went for her neck, fast and quiet. She barely ducked under his arm and countered with a knee to his stomach. Pain burst through her ribs from the force of it. Something cracked. But she didn't let it slow her. All 3 recovered quickly. They circled. No words. No threats. This wasn't a warning. It was an execution attempt. Maya kept moving, one hand ready on her sidearm, but hesitant to draw unless absolutely necessary. She didn't want to kill unless she had to. The first attacker rushed again. She grabbed a trash can lid and deflected the swing of a baton. The lid cracked in half. She spun around, slamming her heel into the second attacker's thigh. He yelped and dropped. That left one. He was larger than the others. Slower, but stronger. He rushed her with brutal force. She went down hard under his weight, her head slamming against the concrete. Stars exploded behind her eyes. But her training took over. She reached for the weak spot behind his knee, twisted sharply and shoved him off. Blood was in her mouth. Her side blazed with pain. But she stood, bruised, shaking, breathing hard. The three attackers scrambled to their feet again. One was limping, another was holding his shoulder, the third was dazed. They weren't expecting resistance like this. They weren't expecting her to fight back like her life depended on it. Because it did. And just as suddenly as they came, they turned and ran, disappearing over the fence and into the back alley in coordinated retreat. Gone in seconds. No license plates, no names, no evidence. Just bruises, blood, and pain screaming in her ribcage. Maya dropped to one knee, her breath shallow, the metallic taste of blood thick in her mouth. Then came the sirens. Too fast, too timed, and with them, Captain Harlan. The first officer stepped out of the cruiser before the engine had even shut off. Then another. 3 units. Captain Harlan emerged from the fourth vehicle, not hurried, not surprised, like a man arriving to collect something already decided. His uniform was pristine, unwrinkled. His hair was combed back with intention. His face wore that same professional smile, thin as thread, cold as stone. Maya was still kneeling when he stepped into her driveway. She stood, slowly, one hand holding her ribs, the other hanging limp at her side. Blood trickled from her temple down her cheek. Harlan looked her over, unimpressed. He scanned her house. "You all right, Special Agent Carter?" Maya stared at him, saying nothing. "No need to explain, we got the call." "What call?" she asked, her voice sharp with pain. "A report of a violent disturbance, multiple injured parties, and a woman seen assaulting men in broad daylight." Maya laughed bitterly through her teeth. "You mean the men who just tried to kill me?" Harlan tilted his head slightly. "Did anyone else see them?" She blinked. "You're kidding. They're gone, no witnesses, no trace." He stepped forward and removed a folded letter from his coat. "We've also received official complaints from Officers Bailey and Carson, along with concerns from within your agency." Maya's breath caught. "This is a notice of suspension," Harlan said, holding out the paper, "pending full investigation into your conduct, including this morning's violent incident." She didn't take it. He placed it on the hood of her car. "And your badge," he added. "We'll take that now." Maya stared at him, blood still dripping down her face, her shirt stained, her ribs screaming every time she breathed. "You were behind this," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "You knew they'd come." Harlan gave a half shrug. "You've made quite a mess, Agent Carter, stirring up attention, causing distrust. People want peace." "You mean silence?" "I mean stability." He motioned to the other officers. One of them stepped forward. Maya looked at her badge. Federal. Earned. Worn with pride. Respected in dozens of states. Infiltrated terrorist cells. Protected witnesses. Took bullets for strangers. Now he'd mended back like it meant nothing. He pulled it from her coat, hand trembling slightly, and looked at it one last time. Then, without a word, she placed it gently on top of the suspension notice. Harlan nodded. The officer took both. And with that, the final seal of betrayal locked in place. Maya stood there, silent, broken, bruised, bleeding. But she did not cry, because they hadn't broken her spirit. They'd just declared war, and she never lost those. The suspension hit the headlines before Maya even made it home. By the time she reached her bedroom, still bruised and bandaged, her phone was already vibrating non-stop. News outlets, blogs, podcasts. They ran with it immediately. FBI agent suspended after violent confrontation with officers. The spin was already working. Her face flashed across the screen, and with it came the twisting of everything she had fought to protect. The framing wasn't subtle. Loses control. Use of excessive force. Unstable background. They didn't mention the assault. They didn't mention the masked attackers. They didn't mention that she was left bleeding in her own driveway. And the silence from inside the bureau? Crushing. No official defense. No internal memo backing her up. No outreach from supervisors. Her badge was gone, and with it, every so-called ally who once called her the backbone of the unit disappeared into the shadows. Colleagues she'd mentored ghosted her calls. Friends from Quantico left her messages on read. One even blocked her entirely. Trolls flooded her social media. Anonymous threats, racial slurs, memes mocking her arrest, edited photos showing her behind bars. One comment simply said, "Should have stayed in the kitchen, sweetheart." She turned her phone off. Maya wasn't a stranger to isolation, but this was surgical, strategic, designed to break her spirit from the inside out. Even her neighbors gave her odd looks when she walked outside to retrieve the mail. No one said anything, but their eyes darted away too fast, like they were afraid of being associated. Word travels fast in suburbia. Only Patrice, the neighbor who'd helped watch the boys, brought over a small casserole and whispered, "I know something's off. You're not alone." But aside from that, silence wrapped around her house like fog. The bruises on her ribs had turned a deep purple mew. Every breath reminded her of what had happened, of how easily it could have ended worse. But the worst pain wasn't physical. It was the realization that the system she'd served her entire adult life could toss her aside without hesitation. Her boys still didn't know everything. They knew something had happened. They saw the way she winced when she bent down, the way she stayed off her phone, the way her voice got tight when they asked about work. She told them, "Mommy's on break for a while." But even kids could hear the tremble behind a lie. Maya sat alone that night staring at her living room wall. Photos of her boys, awards from the bureau, letters of commendation. She looked at them all. Then she picked up her phone. She wasn't going to beg for justice. She was going to take it. The first call she made was to Angela Thomas, her closest friend from law school and now one of the most feared civil rights attorneys in the state. Angela didn't wait for pleasantries. "I saw the news," she said flatly. "Tell me everything." Maya recounted it all, start to finish. The park, the arrest, the suspension, the ambush at home, and finally, the betrayal by Captain Harlan and the silence from the FBI. Angela didn't interrupt once. When Maya finished, Angela's voice was steady and sharp. "They're scared of what you represent," she said. "You're not just an agent, you're a symbol, and they can't control you anymore." "Then let's make them pay for trying," Maya replied. Angela paused. "Do you want a private settlement? I can go that route." "No," Maya said. "I want a court. I want witnesses. I want the truth in the public record." Angela exhaled like she'd been waiting to hear that. "Then we go to war." The second call was to Sarah McNeil, a journalist Maya had protected during an overseas extraction years ago. Sarah owed her life to Maya, and more importantly, she had a reputation for burning down cover-ups. When Maya told her the story, Sarah's voice dropped low. "You know they're going to come after you harder, right?" "I don't remember any of this," Maya said. "I might as well bleed forward." Sarah agreed to meet the next day with her full investigative team. "We'll start digging from the media angle. I'll give them a taste of what they've buried." The third call was to Marcus Bell, a grassroots organizer and former protest leader with national reach. They hadn't spoken in months, but the moment he heard Maya's voice, he snapped to attention. "I've been waiting for this," he said. "We're overdue." Marcus brought a different energy, fire, relentless drive. He didn't ask for details, he asked for names. Captain Harlan, Officers Bailey and Carson, I want those names everywhere, Maya said. They'll wish they'd retired early, Marcus growled. That night, the three of them, Angela, Sarah, and Marcus, met at Maya's home. Angela brought case files and reference law. Sarah brought a recorder and an outline for a multi-part exposé. Marcus brought a burner phone, a laptop, and a list of sympathetic influencers, organizers, and retired cops willing to go public. They formed what Maya called the resistance cell. 3 people who believed her. 3 people who saw the pattern. 3 people who weren't afraid. Over tea and bruises, they built a strategy. Angela would begin the civil complaint process, collecting every legal thread they could pull. Sarah would draft the first article, Unarmed Truth, the story the department won't tell, with timelines, quotes, and official silence from the FBI. Marcus would mobilize public pressure, organizing digital campaigns and identifying possible whistleblowers still inside the department. Maya, meanwhile, had access no one else did. They couldn't take away her brain, and they couldn't erase what she still remembered how to find. She would be the one to uncover what they wanted to stay buried. Maya pulled up her private laptop that night and entered the encrypted portal that most civilians had no idea even existed. It was a legacy access system, a server from her field days that still linked to non-classified complaint logs and misconduct archive. They hadn't revoked everything. They thought she was too broken to use it. They were wrong. She typed in Officer Bailey's badge number. Within seconds, multiple complaint reports surfaced. Most were internal summaries with minimal detail, but one stood out. A 2019 assault report from a Hispanic teen in juvenile custody. Injuries consistent with excessive force, settled quietly. No charges, no discipline. Then she searched Carson. Even worse. An entire section of the file was sealed, but metadata showed 6 logged incidents in 5 years, 3 use-of-force alerts, 2 formal complaints about racial targeting, and every single one had vanished from public record. She forwarded the data to Angela. Within seconds, Angela replied, "This is gold. Do not log off. Screenshot everything. I'll start filing discovery requests." Then Sarah chimed in, "I'm building a timeline now. I want quotes, names, timestamps. I'm going to write this like a war report." Marcus called at midnight. "I've got a former cop who left the force last year. Says he's got dirt on Carson and Harlan both. Wants to meet." Maya looked at the files again. Every piece confirmed what she already felt in her gut. These weren't isolated bad apples. They were a pattern, a system, a protected network of men like Harlan, Bailey, and Carson, shielded from consequence and skilled at silencing dissent. And now they were turning those same tools on her, a woman who once carried a federal badge, who had risked her life for her country, who had done everything right, and was still targeted, silenced, and left for dead. But she wasn't dead. She was awake. Maya gathered the screenshots, cross-referenced them with archived emails, and began building a personal dossier. Every incident, every cover-up, every connection she could prove. The pieces began fitting together. Angela sent a message, "We're going to court." Sarah followed with, "We're going to the public." And Maya? She stared at the wall where her badge used to hang. "We're going to blow their system apart." The house was quiet except for the soft clacking of Maya's keyboard. Her living room had transformed into a war room. Files covered the dining table, sticky notes clung to the walls, a timeline stretched across the floor like a roadmap to the truth. Angela paced behind her, phone pressed to her ear, coordinating the legal logistics with the civil court clerk. Sarah sat cross-legged on the floor, headphones in, editing audio clips and trimming together the first voiceover for their expo. Marcus leaned over a second laptop, updating the secure group chat with activists across 3 states. Maya had barely slept, but adrenaline made her alert. They had the documentation, years of misconduct, settlement records from families silenced by hush money. Internal complaints marked investigated and resolved with no further detail. Several complaints against Bailey and Carson were flagged in the logs, but the names had been redacted. Sarah had already reached out to a whistleblower who claimed the redactions were intentional, part of an internal culture of protectionism. They had the pattern, they had the silence, they had proof. And tomorrow night, Maya would take it public. The community forum at the Southside Community Center was something Marcus had arranged weeks ago, but now the timing was perfect. Pastor Davis, an old friend of Maya's family, had agreed to open the doors and the pulpit. Civil rights leaders were flying in, local press would be there. More importantly, everyday citizens, mothers, fathers, teachers, young people, would fill that room. Maya was no longer just fighting for herself. She was fighting for the teenage boy who filed that complaint in 2019 and never saw justice. She was fighting for the Latina mother whose settlement vanished into legal silence. She was fighting for the old man who'd been beaten on his own porch and told not to call again. Every redacted name, every buried report, every invisible scar. She wasn't a symbol anymore. She was a messenger. Angela finished her call and walked over to Maya, handing her a flash drive. All the case summaries are here. I double-checked the statute timelines. You're covered if anyone tries to throw legal threats your way tomorrow. Sarah pulled her headphones off. I'll have the teaser video up online an hour before the event. Let the public see it while they're still parking. Marcus turned his screen toward the group. 5 protest networks have already RSVP'd. I've got 3 speakers lined up, but none of them are headlining. He looked at Maya. Maya took the flash drive and closed her laptop. She nodded. Then she picked up the file folder, thick and bursting with evidence, and pressed it against her chest like a shield. Then we give them the truth, she said. That evening the house quieted down again. Angela left to prep final legal filings. Sarah headed to the radio station for a short guest spot. Marcus went to meet with local security organizers to ensure safety at the forum. Maya made dinner for the boys. Spaghetti, garlic bread, green beans, the kind of meal that made her feel human again, grounded. Caleb and Jordan talked non-stop about school. Jordan had a spelling test coming up. Caleb had been chosen to lead his science group. They didn't talk about the news. They didn't ask about the bruises anymore. They just wanted their mom back. After dinner, while Maya washed the dishes, she heard rustling in the living room. Crayons, paper, whispering, giggling. When she turned around, Caleb was holding a piece of paper behind his back. "Close your eyes," he said. She smiled and played along. "All right." Jordan's voice whispered, "Okay now." When she opened her eyes, they both held up the drawing. It was Maya, wearing a cape, a star on her chest, her afro pulled back into a crown. Her fists were raised. Behind her were 2 little boys holding up signs that read, "Truth" and "Justice." The title scrawled at the top in crayon, "Supermom, Maya." Maya blinked fast. Caleb grinned. "We made you a superhero." Jordan added, "You're braver than Superman." Her hand went to her mouth, a tremble in her breath. She crouched down, pulled them both into her arms and kissed their heads. The tears came quietly. Not from pain, not from fear. From the reminder. This is what she was fighting for. Their future, their safety, their belief in her. Tomorrow was about every suppressed voice. But tonight was about these 2 boys, the only 2 hearts she couldn't afford to lose. She looked at the drawing again and whispered, "Tomorrow, the truth wins." She kissed their foreheads one more time and tucked them into bed. And as she turned out the light, Maya knew there would be no more backing down. The Southside Community Center had never seen a crowd like this. By 6:30, the parking lot was packed. Lines stretched around the building. Local churches had bussed in seniors from across the city. College students held signs, "We believe Maya," "Unseal the truth," "Black women deserve justice." Civil rights groups showed up in droves. Buttons, banners, clipboards. The scent of incense, fried food, and vinyl banners filled the air. A radio van sat nearby, doing a live feed. Sarah's teaser video had gone viral within the hour, over 100,000 views already. Inside, Pastor Davis stood at the podium watching the people flow in. And then the room stilled. She entered. Maya stepped through the front doors, flanked by Angela, Sarah, and Marcus. She wore a simple black blouse, sleeves rolled to show her healing arms. No makeup, no filter, just raw, visible truth. Her face was still bruised, her ribs still bandaged, but her back was straight, her walk deliberate, and in her hand was that thick folder of evidence, clutched like a weapon forged from years of silence. A hush fell over the room, and then applause. It began as a ripple, then a roar, then a standing ovation. Some people wept, some raised fists, some held their children up to see. Maya reached the stage and stood behind the podium. She didn't speak right away. She looked out into that crowd and saw reflections of her past. Students, elders, fellow agents, mothers, fathers, protesters, journalists, survivors. Then she opened the folder. One page at a time, she laid the truth on the table. Complaint summaries, redacted names, settlement payout totals, internal memos that should have been public, photos, quotes, dates, case numbers, and then, finally, she spoke. I was trained to find the truth, but when I found it inside my own community, I was punished for it. The crowd leaned in. She continued. I was beaten, suspended, and left without protection because I did my job too well, because I refused to look the other way, because I believed that justice should not depend on who you are or the color of your skin. She paused. Then she raised the drawing Caleb and Jordan had made, held it high. This is what my sons see when they look at me. A superhero. But heroes bleed. Heroes break. And tonight, I want you to know that I am standing here not because I'm unbreakable, but because I'm unwilling to stay broken. The room erupted. Pastor Davis stepped forward, tears streaming down his cheeks. He wrapped his arms around her. The crowd began chanting her name. Maya, Maya, Maya. She stood there, at the edge of the spotlight, folder in one hand, the drawing in the other, her name echoing off the walls. She had been ambushed, silenced, humiliated. But now, she was the story, and tomorrow the world would watch it unfold. The hum of voices in the community center had built to a low roar. Every seat was filled. People lined the walls, the aisles, even spilling out into the hall. Reporters pressed close to the stage, their cameras raised, capturing every second. Maya could feel the air charged with tension, anticipation, a fragile edge that was ready to ignite at the slightest spark. Union President Howard Malone stepped up to the microphone, his jaw tight, his tie knotted perfectly, his expression molded into a mask of authority. He leaned forward, voice amplified by the speakers, trying to reclaim control of the room. These accusations, he began, tone sharp and dismissive, are nothing more than wild conspiracy theories. This woman, he jabbed a finger in Maya's direction, is unstable. She was suspended by her own agency. She has a history of erratic behavior, and now she wants to drag hard-working officers through the mud for her own gain. The crowd hissed, murmurs of discontent rippling like a wave. A few shouted back, "Liar!" But Malone pressed on, voice louder. She has no proof, no authority, no credibility. We cannot allow our officers to be torn down by lies and hysteria. This community depends on us, and I will not let a bitter, unstable agent destroy the trust between police and citizens. For a moment, silence followed, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see if Maya would falter. But Maya didn't move away from the podium. Her eyes burned into Malone's, unflinching, unwavering. Then she spoke, clear, steady, controlled. And I can prove it. Her words cut through the room like a blade. The silence broke instantly into a chorus of gasps and murmurs. Reporters leaned forward, microphones stretched out, phones raised higher, recording from every angle. Even those in the back strained to see, sensing that something irreversible was about to happen. Malone's face tightened. He shifted uncomfortably, tugging at his cuff. "That's enough," he barked, his voice rising above the noise. "This forum is over." But Maya didn't back down. She stepped closer to the microphone, her folder of documents gripped in her hand. She looked over the crowd, faces of mothers, fathers, young students, elders, all watching her with a mix of fear, hope, and hunger for truth. "This isn't hysteria," she said, her voice stronger now. "This isn't a story spun out of thin air. This," she held up the folder, shaking it once for emphasis, "is evidence." Malone stepped forward quickly, waving his hand. "You don't know what you're talking about. Sit down." But Maya didn't. She leaned forward, her voice ringing clear. "For years you buried complaints. For years you silenced victims. For years you hid behind procedure and redactions. Tonight, the truth comes into the light." The room erupted in applause, chants starting in the back, surging forward. Malone's voice was drowned out by the sound of the people. Maya held her ground. The storm had begun. Maya slammed the thick folder onto the podium, the sound reverberating through the hall like a gavel calling order. Pages spilled out across the surface, sliding toward the edge, each one stamped with dates, names, and case numbers. She lifted the first sheet and held it high. "March 15th, 2019, she read aloud. "A 16-year-old Latino boy arrested for trespassing. Complaint filed against Officer Bailey for excessive force. Broken wrist, black guy. Report marked resolved, no action taken." Gasps rippled through the room. Maya dropped the paper flat on the podium and lifted another. April 3rd, 2020. Officers Carson and Bailey stopped an elderly black couple outside their home, alleged failure to comply. The couple filed a complaint for harassment. Case vanished. Not a single record in the public file. She slammed it down. Cameras clicked furiously. Phones trembled in the air, recording every second. Malone's face had gone pale. He shuffled his papers, muttering into the microphone. "This is all taken out of context. These are confidential documents." Maya cut him off, her voice rising. "Confidential or buried? Hidden from the very community you claim to protect? Let's go on." Another sheet, another story. June 7th, 2021. Domestic violence victim called for protection. Instead, she was threatened with arrest if she pressed charges. Officers involved: Bailey and Carson. Settlement paid: $10,000, 0 cents. Agreement signed under silence. The crowd roared. People stood, shouting, "Shame! Cover up! Justice now!" Malone raised his hands, desperate. "This is not what it looks like. She's twisting the truth." Maya turned to him sharply, fire in her eyes. "No, Malone. You twisted it, you erased it, you buried it, and tonight I am digging it back up." She spread the papers across the podium, one after another, until it looked like the very surface was drowning in complaints, payouts, signatures. "Every redaction has a name," she said. "Every silence has a victim. Every missing report has a story, and tonight, this community deserves to know." The crowd was electric. Reporters scrambled forward, snapping photos of each sheet. Some even shouted questions. "Can we get copies? Are these verified? Will this go to court?" Maya leaned forward, voice steady, unwavering. "It's all verified. Dates, names, signatures, cross-referenced against payout records. This is not rumor. This is fact. This is proof. And it's only the beginning." Malone's composure finally cracked. He grabbed the microphone, nearly yanking it off its stand. His voice was shrill now, desperate. "Security, remove her. This forum is over." But no one moved. The security guards at the side exchanged uncertain glances. The people were on Maya's side now, chanting, shouting, standing between her and the men who wanted her silenced. And then, just as Malone's voice broke into a scream, the back doors of the hall slammed open. The sound of the doors echoed through the hall. 3 figures stormed in, masks covering their faces, their movements sharp, military. Maya recognized them instantly. The same men who had ambushed her in her driveway, the same men who had tried to silence her with fists and weapons. The crowd gasped, people screamed, phones shot up even higher. Malone froze, eyes darting. "What are you doing?" he hissed, but the men ignored him. They charged the stage. Maya's body reacted before her mind had time to catch up. Training surged through her veins like muscle memory. She stepped back from the podium, dropping into a stance, pulling her son's voices into her head. "You're braver than Superman." The first man lunged, swinging a baton. Maya caught his wrist mid-strike, twisting it hard until he yelped, then drove her knee into his gut. He crumpled, falling sideways into the stage lights. The crowd erupted, half in fear, half in awe. The second came from her right, faster, heavier. He aimed low, trying to tackle her legs. Maya pivoted, grabbed his collar, and slammed him into the podium with a force that rattled the microphone. Papers flew everywhere, scattering across the stage like snow. The third man raised a taser, aiming straight for her chest. The crowd screamed, but Maya sidestepped, lightning quick, grabbing his arm and using his momentum against him. She twisted, redirected the charge straight into his partner, sending sparks flying as the man convulsed and dropped. Gasps, shouts, cheers. Maya stood in the center, chest heaving, her bruised ribs screaming with every breath. But her stance was steady, her eyes locked on the crowd. She pointed at the men sprawled on the stage floor, their masks slipping to reveal familiar faces. "This," she shouted, her voice echoing through the hall, "is what they do when you tell the truth. They send men to silence you. They send fear to keep you quiet, but I will not be silent." The crowd exploded into chants. "Ina, Maya." The sound shook the walls. Reporters climbed onto chairs for a better angle. Cameras zoomed in close on her face, capturing every drop of sweat, every bruise, every ounce of defiance. Malone tried one last desperate move, grabbing the microphone. "This woman is dangerous." She attacked them. But the crowd drowned him out. "Maya, Maya, Maya!" She raised her fist, evidence scattered at her feet, 3 men groaning on the ground, the entire room united in a single voice. She had been beaten, she had been suspended, she had been ambushed. Now she was unbreakable. Bailey's face didn't twitch. He stared at Maya like he was trying to figure out what she was hiding, even though she had already told him everything. His silence stretched on, feeding the tension like gasoline soaking dry brush. Then he said it. "The SUV matches a description we got this morning. Possible connection to a string of break-ins. Dark SUV, female suspect. 2 juveniles, just saying it fits." It was the kind of lie that sounded just vague enough to pass if no one challenged it. But Maya wasn't about to let it go unchecked. Not with her boys listening, not in front of cameras. She squared her shoulders and said evenly, "That is absolutely false, and you know it." Bailey shrugged. "Ma'am, we don't know what's true until we verify. That's how this works." Maya took a deep breath. "So let me be clear. You're accusing me of car theft in front of my sons with no evidence, no warrant, no report that names me, just a vague description that conveniently fits the woman you've already decided is suspicious because she's black in a public park." Jordan's eyes filled with tears, but he didn't let them fall. He bit his lip and stood tall beside his mother. Caleb clutched her hand tighter than ever, his small knuckles turning white. Bailey didn't back down. "Ma'am, I'm asking you one more time to show ID. Step away from the kids and we'll sort this out at the station." "No," Maya said. "We are not going anywhere. I told you who I am. I told you these are my children. You have no cause." Carson shifted beside Bailey, a nervous glance flicking toward the growing group of onlookers. One woman muttered, "This is disgusting." A man nearby added, "She already told you who she is. Let her go." But Bailey didn't blink. He narrowed his eyes and gestured toward Maya's bag. "If you won't cooperate, we'll retrieve the ID ourselves." "You will do no such thing," Maya said, her voice rising slightly now, not out of fear, but control. Her hand moved slowly, calmly, toward her purse. "I'll show you the ID. I want this to end, but you will not touch me, and you will not frighten my sons." Jordan held his breath. Caleb's hand squeezed tighter. Bailey nodded slowly. "Fine, get it." She reached in, deliberately slow, her hand brushing aside the notebook and sanitizer bottle. She touched the leather ID wallet tucked in the side panel. And then she felt it. The pressure. Bailey's hand. He grabbed her wrist. Maya's body reacted before her brain could even catch up. The grip was sudden, jarring. It sent a shock up her arm and a flood of heat to her chest. Her sons flinched at the same time she did. But this wasn't panic. This was training. With one fluid motion, Maya twisted her wrist against the pressure, turning outward. Classic joint manipulation. She stepped back, guiding Caleb behind her as she pulled her arm free with calculated force. Her stance dropped low, knees slightly bent, her back foot anchoring her body weight. Bailey stumbled one step, surprised. Carson took a defensive step sideways, hand flinching toward his belt. Maya raised her voice, not a scream, but loud enough for the crowd and cameras. "Do not put your hands on me. I have complied. I gave you no threat, and now you've crossed a line." Bailey's face turned red. "You resisted." "I defended myself," she snapped, "and I did so while protecting 2 children standing beside me." The crowd responded audibly. A wave of gasps. Someone shouted, "She's right." Another voice yelled, "You're being filmed." Jordan stepped in front of Caleb instinctively, his arms out like a shield, shaking visibly but trying not to show it. Maya placed a hand on his shoulder, steadying him. Bailey looked around, suddenly unsure. He hadn't expected resistance, not this kind, not this woman. The confidence, the clarity, the sheer control. He was used to authority working like gravity, pulling everyone downward. But she wasn't falling. Carson finally spoke, quiet and sharp. "Like she might actually be who she says she is." Bailey glared. "Doesn't matter. She laid hands on me." Maya's voice cut through the noise. "I didn't lay hands on you. I removed yours from me, on camera, in front of witnesses, in front of my children." Bailey's jaw locked. Maya didn't move. Instead, she bent slightly at the knee. One hand reached slowly into the open purse, keeping the other hand visible. No sudden motion, just deliberate, confident purpose. She pulled out the black leather wallet, flipped it open, held it high. A silver badge gleamed in the sunlight, its eagle crest catching the reflection from the nearest phone camera. Underneath the shield, her credentials. Dr. Maya Carter, Special Agent, Federal Bureau of Investigation. The moment stopped. Completely. Carson blinked twice. Bailey's mouth opened, but made no sound. Maya's voice rang out, sharp and absolute. "I am Special Agent Dr. Maya Carter, Federal Bureau of Investigation. You just assaulted a federal officer." Gasps rippled through the crowd like a ripple across still water. Phones raised higher. People pushed closer, murmuring, whispering, trying to make sure they'd seen what they thought they'd seen. Did she say FBI? She's an agent? That man grabbed her. "I got it all." Maya's eyes stayed locked on Bailey. She didn't blink, didn't flinch, didn't move. She let the silence do the work. Bailey stepped back, like gravity had finally caught him. Carson's mouth moved, but nothing came out. His hand dropped away from his belt, and he stepped behind Bailey, suddenly looking like a child hiding behind a taller kid at recess. Maya lowered her badge, turning it slightly for the cameras. She wasn't just proving her identity, she was documenting the truth. Then, calmly, she turned to her sons. "Jordan, Caleb, get behind me." They obeyed without hesitation, stepping behind her like well-rehearsed choreography. Jordan grabbed Caleb's hand this time. Maya turned back toward the two officers. "Now, back away from my children, immediately." Bailey stared at her, his lips tight, nostrils flaring. The kind of face a man makes when everything he thought he controlled slips through his fingers. He didn't move fast, but he moved. One slow step back, then another. Carson followed. The tension didn't leave, it pulsed in the air like static. But the direction had changed, the power had shifted. Everyone watching could feel it. Maya lifted her badge again, speaking clearly for every phone recording. "This officer assaulted me without cause. He fabricated a reason to detain me. He accused me of car theft and child abduction in front of my sons. This was racial profiling. This was abuse of power. And I will be filing a formal report with the U.S. Department of Justice." Bailey tried to speak. "You were..." She didn't let him finish. "Don't. Not another word. You were warned. You escalated." Carson stepped forward, his voice softer. "Look, maybe we just got off on the wrong..." Maya raised a hand. "I don't want explanations. I want names, badge numbers. And I want you out of this park. Now." More phones lifted. A teenager in a hoodie shouted, "Tell it, Agent Carter." The crowd responded with claps, whistles, a sudden surge of verbal support. She protected her babies. About time somebody said something. "Whew, that badge ain't fake." Bailey looked at the cameras, the dozens of them now pointed directly at his face. He reached up, finally, and adjusted his vest. A nervous tick. Carson quietly muttered his badge number. Bailey didn't. Maya asked again. "I said badge number." Bailey hesitated, then gave it. The air was sharp with shame. The officers turned slowly and began walking back to the car. No sirens, no arrests, just the echo of their boots on concrete and the weight of 100 eyes following them. Maya exhaled slowly, then turned to her sons. "You okay?" Caleb nodded, wide-eyed. Jordan asked quietly, "Are they going to come back?" "No," Maya said. "They won't. And this time the world would know why."